let's start with an overview of what we did in the previous video. So we managed to fork our GitHub repository into a new GitHub account, meaning that we created a copy of that repository inside the new GitHub account. And then we cloned that repository, or that new repository, which is a copy of the old one. We cloned it into this new local environment, creating a local repository. And then we made some changes and committed them. And then we tried to push this repository back to the GitHub account with all the changes that we made. Now we had a problem at this stage because I was working with two GitHub accounts and I was still logged in to the old one. So when I tried to push the changes to the new GitHub account, I was still connected to the old one and the push failed. Now let's find a way to fix that. First, let's understand why we were still logged into the old account and we were not prompted to enter our username and password when logging in to GitHub. So to do this, we can have a look at our configuration settings for Git by using the command git config and the option list. So this will print the list of configuration settings for Git. So if you use the down arrow, you can see more settings. And the one we are interested in is credential.helper. So at the moment, your password and your username are stored right there in the OS X keychain. And they are used automatically when you try to log into GitHub. So basically we are forced to log into the old account. So you're going to need to unset this variable. So to do that, I'm going to use a command git config, then system unset, followed by the variable I'd like to unset. Now before unsetting the variable, let's check its value. So we're looking at credential.helper and the value is OSX keychain. Now I used system just in case this has been set in the system configuration file. Now let's unset this value. So I've got an error here because I need to be logged in as an administrator. So I'm going to use sudo followed by the command. And then I need to put my computer password, my account password. And now if I check the value, I don't get anything because we have just unset it. Now, if you are on Windows, you can go to your control panel, user accounts, credential manager, and manage your credentials there. So in your generic credentials, you'll find GitHub, and all you need to do is remove those credentials from there. All right, now let's try to push to GitHub again and make sure that this time we are prompted to input our credentials. And here we go, it's asking for the username. So for the new account, the username is Gentle Collaborator. And I'm going to input my password. And this time our push has been successful. Now let's check that by refreshing this page and checking the content of the files that we changed earlier. So here we go, file 5. So that's the new line we added to line 5. And file 6, that's the new line we added to 5.6. And that's the last commit which we made involving both those files. At this stage, we simulated successfully how our collaborator would push the changes they made locally to their own GitHub account. And now the next step is to make a pull request. So a pull request means that they're going to suggest their changes to us, basically. So whatever feature they added to the code, whatever bug they fixed in the code, they're going to tell us, well, we would like you to incorporate those changes in your final code. So let's go ahead and simulate this. Now, before making a pull request, let's go to Insights and then Network and just have a quick look again at the history of this repository. So the owner here is our collaborator, and we can see here the full history of the repository, including all branches. And this is the last change which was made by this user, Development Island. Now that change was made by off your code prior to the forking, that one as well. And this one shows Development Island because I've done this on my computer and the user at that moment or that stage was Development Island. That's why we see this as the user. Now if I go back and make a change to any of these files, so for example I can add a line right there, and then add a comment and commit. Then if I go back to Insights and Network, the last change will show as being done by Gentle Collaborator, because I've done this directly inside GitHub and the user is Gentle Collaborator. Whereas that change was done by Development Island as I've done that on Development Island's computer locally. Now let's make a pull request. So I'm going to go to code and then new pull request. So if I scroll down, I can see the changes which were made to the repository, which I forked from off your code. So I added a line there and I added a couple of lines there. And it says here that these branches can be automatically merged, talking about the master branch of off your code and the master branch of Gentle Collaborator. Now I can click on this green button to create the pull request, and I can add a title and a comment. So for example, changed file 5 and file 6, added a few lines. So let's create the pull request. Now if I head to the first account and refresh the page, then I can see one new pull request. So I can see that it has been made by Gentle Collaborator, and this is the title, and here are the comments. I can also see the list of commits made since my repository was forked. So if I click on any of these commits, then I can see the details of the commit. So this is the first commit when we changed file 5 and file 6, and this is the second commit when we updated file 6 directly from GitHub. That's why we see Gentle Collaborator as the owner, while we see Development Island as the author of that change, which was made locally on my computer and then pushed to GitHub. Now if I go to Insights, then Network, I won't see those commits in my own branches, but I'm going to see them next to Gentle Collaborator. All right. Now, if I want to merge the pull requests, meaning that I'm going to incorporate those changes into my own master branch, then I just need to make sure that I am happy with any changes made by Gentle Collaborator. And then if I'm happy with them, then I'm going to approve the changes, and then I'm going to merge them into my master branch. So let's go ahead and do this by clicking on this green button. I'm going to change the title to merge file 5 and file 6 changes from Gentle Collaborator. And let's confirm the merge. All right. And if you change your mind, you can always revert that change. So now let's have a look at our insights and then network. And now we can see the changes made by Gentle Collaborator right after forking our master branch. So right after that change, they forked our master branch and then they made those changes. So the first change happened locally on a computer. It was made by Development Island and then pushed back to GitHub. The second change or commit was made directly by Gentle Collaborator inside GitHub. And then they created a pull request, which we approved, and then we merged their changes into our master branch. Now, since we covered many concepts in this example, it's a good idea to go through a quick summary to make sure that these concepts sink in. So first of all, we were working on our own local repository, which we pushed to our own GitHub account. And then after that, Gentle Collaborator forked our GitHub repository into their own GitHub account. Basically, they created a new repository, which is a copy of our own GitHub repository. And then after that, instead of making changes directly on GitHub, they chose to clone that GitHub repository into their own local environment. So this created a new repository, which is a copy of that one, in their local computer. So they used their favorite editor to make changes and commit them. And then after that, they pushed back those changes to their own GitHub account. And then they created a pull request asking us to review those changes, and if we're happy with them, to incorporate them into our own project. Now we had the chance to have a quick look and approve the changes, and then we merged those changes into our own project. So hopefully this gave you a good understanding of how remote repositories work and how you can use these tools and concepts to do collaborative work.